Hey everybody, it's GobletX and welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and today I'll be playing another quick draft of the Brothers War. Without further ado, let's just get into our pack 1 pick 1, and this is going to be a pretty easy Horned Stoneseeker. I think the card plays incredibly well. 2 mana for a 2/2 menace is already a great aggressive body, and the Powerstone that it gives you can be very nice. It's going to be extra mana ramp if you have a lot of artifacts in your deck, or it's going to be an expendable token to sacrifice to cards like Penregan Strongbow if you have good sacrifice effects. So Stoneseeker, easily the best card in this pack. We've got some pretty sweet commons though. Boulder Branch Golem is a card to keep an eye out for if you're playing a green deck that can hit some higher mana costs. This is a great way to stabilize against more aggressive decks, getting a decent sized body on the board and gaining a lot of life at 4 mana and doing much more at 7 mana. That's where you can kind of flip the game and really establish a lead on the board state. Bitter Union is solid card draw out of red because they've stacked on this nice little sack ability that can get extra damage in out of nowhere. So that card plays pretty well as well. Outside of these three, there's also the Penregan Strongbow, which is ideal for the red decks in the format with the amount of Power Stones flying around. So pretty sweet commons, but pretty easy Horned Stoneseeker to start things off. For pack 1 pick 2, we don't have an incredible follow-up in red. Whirling Strike is the best red card here, and it's just fine. It's a solid combat trick, but you don't need to take combat tricks massively highly. We've got some other options in other colors. None of them are particularly powerful when it comes to the monocolored or colorless cards here. Aeronaut Cavalry, one of the strongest commons in this pack. However, it's really designed for a deck with a lot of soldiers, and there are very few soldiers in red. That is the blue-white archetype in this format, so strongest common really doesn't go with our pack 1 pick 1 anyway, so we might as well go with the multicolored card because it kind of feels like any common we take here is either going to be pretty weak or not going to fit into a red-white deck regardless. So whatever card we take, we're going to be heading in a completely different direction, so might as well just take the strongest card, even if it's completely off color from our first pick. And Evangel of Synthesis is a pretty strong card. 2 mana for a 2/3, you get to draw a card, discard a card when it hits the board, and every time that you've drawn 2 or more cards in a turn, it will be a 3/3 menace during that turn. So 2 mana for a 3/3 menace is obviously pretty absurd, but you do have to put in work to get there. You got to play that blue-black archetype in the format, which is focused around drawing at least 1 extra card each turn to guarantee that you've drawn 2 or more. And again, it's really nice because it triggers all of your other draw 2 cards. You draw 1 card during your draw step, then you play this during your main phase. Boom, draw a card, discard a card, that's your second draw for the turn. So it really works quite well in the archetype, and we'll scoop it up here. Could go for Foundry Inspector, I guess, as the most open card, but I've never been overly impressed with it. It's just a fine card. For pack 1 pick 3 now, we've got a second Evangel of Synthesis, so we could kind of lock in onto that archetype, but this pack is very powerful. We have several other options as well. We have Recruitment Officer, which is a really good aggressive white creature. 1 mana for a 2/1, so very high power for the mana cost, plus it gives you a mana sink ability later in the game. Dump all your mana into this to try to draw additional creatures when you're out of stuff to do. So Recruitment Officer is pretty exceptional. Again, there's that Strongbow for the red decks. There's a Wing Commando for a solid flyer. And there's Combat Courier as the best flexible card in the pack, which is a really nice one, and it does work really well in the Evangel of Synthesis blue-black kind of draw 2 decks, because you can play this, sacrifice it, and draw a card. That is 2 cards drawn during your turn. Then on a later turn, you can unearth it and do it again to trigger all of your draw 2 cards again. So really like Combat Courier as a super flexible option. Recruitment Officer, very strong, strongest aggressive card here. And then Evangel would kind of lock us into an archetype, and we could start drafting a bit on rails from here just to make things simple. And if I really want to play Stoneseeker, we can go with Strongbow and keep heading that direction. But I think I'm going to go for another Evangel of Synthesis here, see how the blue-black draw 2 archetype could work out for us. Alright, pack 1 pick 4, we've got a pretty sweet card. Well, multiple pretty sweet commons in blue and black, mainly Wing Commando as a nice cheap flyer, Disfigure as excellent cheap removal, and Powerstone Fracture as solid cheap removal. This you need to have something expendable on the board, a Powerstone token, or like a 1/1 creature, something like that to sacrifice to use this, but it can blow up anything. It is sorcery speed, and requires you to sacrifice something though, so I think I prefer the Disfigure just a little bit, just a tiny bit, in blue-black in particular, because I don't think that this color pair has a lot of great token production. I think black-green, black-white is where I'm usually the happiest with Powerstone Fracture. They tend to have a little bit more token production and a little bit more cards that care about dying, like death triggers in the black-green archetype can be pretty powerful, so I think I'm going to go for the Disfigure here. Take our first removal spell over the Flyer or the Sacrifice removal spell. Pack 1, pick 5 now. We've got a Combat Courier, which is an excellent, excellent card for the blue-black draw 2 archetype. As I said before, making sure that you've drawn 2 or more cards in 2 separate turns thanks to that Unearth being able to come back later. So I think we go Combat Courier here with 2 copies of the Evangel of Synthesis. Scrapwork Cohort is probably the strongest card in the pack in a vacuum, but you do ideally want to be an aggressive white-based deck for that. But all these Unearth cards, because they are artifacts up front, and they only require 1 mana of their Unearth color later, are pretty easy to splash, because there is a good amount of colorless mana fixing in the format, so could still go for the Scrapwork Cohort. Do just want to at least mention it, because it is a very strong card, but I think Combat Courier is going to be sweet for blue-black draw too, so we'll stick to that. Pack 1, pick 6, we have Emergency Weld versus Boulder Branch Golem. I think both of these are exceptional. You don't need the green mana to make Boulder Branch Golem good, but you do need to be able to make it to that 7 mana. Power Stones can help get there quite a bit, since it is an artifact creature. Or just having a lot of cheap removal, being a more controlling deck can get there. I think Boulder Branch Golem is generally more impactful, but Emergency Weld is going to be easier to cast a larger amount of the time. It's good graveyard recursion. I think I'm going to go for the Boulder Branch Golem. I feel like definitely in Premier Draft, not sure how the bots do it in Quick Draft, but certainly in Premier Draft, you're going to see a lot more copies of Emergency Weld than Boulder Branch Golem, simply because Emergency Weld is a black card, whereas Boulder Branch Golem is a colorless card, where you don't have to play green to run it. So pretty much everybody could draft Boulder Branch Golems and play them at the top end, whereas Emergency Weld, it's only the players in a black deck, so should see them more often and get them later. We'll take a Boulder Branch Golem here. Now we see a Gnawing Vermin, which is a perfectly solid 1-drop. If you have a lot of Unearth cards in your deck, you can mill yourself when this enters the battlefield to try to put a Combat Courier or something into your graveyard to unearth later for value, but even just as a little roadblock against the aggressive decks, little 1/1 that trades off into a 2 toughness creature or 2 1 toughness creatures. It's pretty nice. You slow your opponent down a good amount. And we get a second Combat Courier, pick 8. That is beautiful. That is very, very much something that we're interested in here. This pack is super weak when it comes to blue and black cards. Argivian Avenger is a very filler top-end card. I think I would just prefer to run Boulder Branch Golems if we find those. Depth Charge Colossus, again, very filler. Needs a whole bunch of mana, and you have to keep spending mana to untap it. Juggernaut would be a fine splash, but it is not good at playing the defensive. It has to attack each turn of Fable, and Firebomb is a boatload of mana for that removal spell, even if you have a good amount of Power Stone tokens to help pay for it, so I don't think I'll end up playing any of these cards here, and Defabricate is just too narrow in my opinion, so not in love with any of these. I guess I'll just take the big uncommon dork, Argivian Avenger. Alright, I'm not going to play a Spectrum Sentinel, so I'll just take the best card in the pack regardless of color, which is Aeronaut Cavalry. Quite unlikely we head in the Soldier's direction, but we're definitely not playing anything else in the pack. Another pack with pretty much no playables. Lauren's Escape's a fine combat trick at least, so I'll throw that in the sideboard. Pick 12 now. Coastal Bulwark is actually not terrible if you're in blue. 2 mana for a 3/3 defender isn't great, but it also has a decent mana sink ability, the Surveil, to set up your draws. So if you're a slower deck that's just trying to slow the game down and keep your opponent's aggression under check, the Bulwark can be fine. Transmigrant Altar is far too slow to be super good, especially when you're not getting anything massive out of the altar. I go for just the big Cave Guard, which is also far too much mana, but we gotta take something at the end of these packs here, even if it is a bunch of cards we're probably not playing. Alright, pack 2, pick 1. We are gonna take an 8 mana card here. which is Cityscape Leveler. 8 mana for an 8/8 trample. Whenever you cast this spell and whenever it attacks, destroy up to 1 non-land permanent, and its controller creates a tapped Powerstone token. This card's insane. It is an 8 mana 8/8 trample and a removal spell all together slapped onto one card. The problem is that it is 8 mana, but it also unearths for 8 later if it does die without getting exiled. Cityscape Leveler is pretty bonkers, and that's a card I would pretty much pick one, pack one, or pack two, pick one, or pack three, pick one, no matter what I'm drafting. Ideally, we can get some amount of Power Stones to make this easier to cast, but it is such an explosive card, it's worth it even if we don't. So, super, super powerful card. That's what we'll take here. If it weren't in the pack, Overwhelming Remorse is an excellent removal spell we could take. Or if we want to try to head very heavy into black, Corrupt is a very fun potential win condition and just a really good removal spell. We'll take Cityscape Leveler. Pack 2, pick 2, we see a Disfigure. We can get our second copy of Disfigure. We can get our third Combat Courier. We can get our second Gnawing Vermin. Those are the premium cards in the pack. I think I'd like to get my second Disfigure here. We're still quite low on removal. And if we wheel either a Combat Courier or a Gnawing Vermin, we'll be pretty happy to see those. Pick 3 now. Not much going on. There's another Gnawing Vermin. There's a Scrapwork Mutt here. That is about it. We are only 2 cards deep into blue, really. We have the Combat Courier's Unearth ability, but we can splash that in. We just have 2 of Angels still when it comes to blue cards. So if I go for Horned Stoneseeker, if I go in that direction, I have 1 Power Stone already. And then Scrapwork Mutt is another solid red card. That would be fine even in the blue-black deck because it's going to help trigger our draw 2s. We discard a card, draw a card when it hits the board, which lets all of our cards that care about having drawn 2 cards have their abilities going. So I'll take the Scrapwork Mutt here because it's going to make the cut in the blue-black deck. But it also gives me another card towards maybe pushing back into red if red looks more open here. Well, third of Angel of Synthesis, I guess that's our direction, although Energy Refractor would be really nice in here as well. Another card that draws a card when it hits the board, and it is that great colorless mana fixing for whatever we want to do. But I can't really resist. Getting 3 copies of the same Signpost Uncommon is always a really nice place to be, because then you can really build around it. You're like, okay, we're just going to take all the draw 2, and we're just going to try to beat down with 2 mana 3/3s with Menace, if we're lucky. It's a Yoshin Tactician pick 5 as well, which is a great card for blue-white soldiers. Speaking of blue-white soldiers, Yoshin Frontliner is a nice aggressive card for that archetype, but it could be fine here still. Probably just going to go for a Powerstone Fracture. We don't have anything super expendable yet. I guess we have Gnawing Vermin and a couple Combat Couriers. That would be fine. But the main problem is that our only removal is 2 copies of Disfigure. So getting a removal spell that can kill things that are larger than 2 toughness feels pretty important. I'm going to take a Powerstone Fracture here. Ooh, pack 2, pick 6, a beautiful card for the draw 2 archetype. Thopter Mechanic, a 2 mana 2/1. When it dies, you get a 1/1 flyer no matter what. And whenever you draw a card, whenever you draw your second card each turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on the Thopter Mechanic, so it can turn into a 2 mana 3/2, a 2 mana 4/3, so on and so forth. The Thopter Mechanic is busted because it is super good up front and it can only get better. We are passing up on another Energy Refractor though, which is kind of sad because it would make just splashing a little bit of red pretty easy, and that would be a nice place to be. But Thopter Mechanic's a premium uncommon for the deck that we're currently trying to draft. Gix's Caress is a fine discard spell that more importantly leaves us a Power Stone token to help make it up to our Cityscape Leveler. We can also use that Power Stone token to sacrifice it to a Power Stone Fracture. So I like Gix's Caress here. Seems fine for this deck. Elsewhere Flask can trigger the draw 2 strategy. Also got a Gigamole though, which is a solid 4-drop creature, and I think I'm pretty low on creatures, yeah. We have a bunch of 1-2 mana creatures, but then there's a wide gap until we hit 6 mana and up. So having like a 4-drop creature in the middle there seems fine. I might still go for the Elsewhere Flask. But I guess I have 3 of Angel of Synthesis, 1 Scrapwork Mutt, 2 Combat Courier. I have like 6 cards that all draw a card to help trigger the draw 2 spells. Already had a pretty good count for that. I mean, the Elsewhere Flask is also mana fixing, and if we manage to draft a Corrupt, that's the 1-2 punch, where you sacrifice the Elsewhere Flask, make all your lands swamps, and then cast Corrupt. So however many lands you control is how much damage you're doing, so that's pretty fun. I'll get goofy with it. I'll take an Elsewhere Flask and see if the Corrupt comes back to us. Probably not the right pick, probably just take a Gigamole here and actually get some 3 or 4 mana creatures into this deck, but it's the fun pick. Definitely the fun pick. I don't like Supply Drop, Power Plant Worker too much. Air Marshal's really just for a soldier deck. Mask of the Jade Crafter, you ideally want to be in green for this, but we could play it as just one random big golem, I guess. Take a Mask of the Jade Crafter, maybe. Wow, we got Combat Courier and Gnawing Vermin back? Feels like an excellent place to be. I'll take another Combat Courier here and have that really consistent draw too, and we got the other Gnawing Vermin back. We can definitely mill ourselves with these Gnawing Vermins, because now we have 5 Unearth cards, 3 Combat Courier, 1 Scrapwork Mutt, and 1 Cityscape Leveler. So we could definitely end up milling something to Unearth later, which is good value. I'm not sure I'm going to have room for Coastal Bulwarks, because we have 5 incredible 2-mana creatures already, 3 of Angel of Synthesis, 1 Mutt, and 1 Thopter Mechanic. So I think I'm just going to take the very filler, kind of mediocre third path Savant here. It's just a lot of mana to get to that ability, and a 3-mana 2/3 is not great, but we just don't have anything going on at 3 mana anyway. So we'll scoop those up. And let's see what we've got. Out of pack 3, pick number 1. Got a Razor Lash Transmigrant. 2 mana for a 3/1 that can't block, but it can come back from your graveyard to the battlefield later with another +1/+1 counter. Seems good if we're getting really aggressive, and overall that does kind of look like what we're doing here because our curve is nothing but 1 and 2 mana creatures, and ideally we're just beating down with 2 mana 3/3 menace cards. So Transmigrant seems fine here. It's also a great card to sacrifice to a Powerstone Fracture. Transmigrant seems okay. It's a good ability to have in our graveyard for Gnawing Vermin as well. We could mill that and then bring it back from the graveyard to the battlefield later. Yeah, I think I'm on Transmigrant here. Not too much else going on. There's a Thraxodemon. We could sack something to get the second card draw for the turn. There's another Boulder Branch Golem for the top end, but our top end is insane already with Boulder Branch and Cityscape Leveler. And there's a Self-Assembler if I want to draft another Assembly Worker or 2 to make this kind of like a 5-mana 4/4 draw card, which is a pretty good deal, but I'll just go for the fun 2-drop rare. Pack 3, pick 2, I'll scoop up another Scrapwork Mutt to go with our draw 2 triggers. It's going to work really well. Drafna, Founder of Latnam, is cool, but very, very slow. This is a relatively aggressive format, and there are some pretty powerful mana sinks or pretty powerful late game cards that I would absolutely play. However, some of them are just like a little too dirtily for my tastes, and Drafna definitely fits that bill. Only 1 toughness as well, so it dies to like every kind of removal in the book. And yeah, it just takes a lot of mana investment to get Drafna going, so I'm just going to take the Scrapwork Mutt here. Just great for our archetype. Pack 3, pick 3, we've got an Energy Refractor, which looks quite good at getting the off-color Unearth ability of our 2 Scrapwork Mutts going. We've passed up on a lot of these before, wanting them. Hopefully we can wheel the Trench Stalker. This is like the perfect 5-drop for this deck, because it'll consistently be a 5-mana 4/5 Death Touch lifelink. A really good deal if you can keep it doing that. If we can't wheel that, maybe we get an Emergency Weld back, which would be fine with a little bit of our self-mill with the 2 Gnawing Vermins that we have. If we can't get either of those back, I can't imagine someone's going to take Disciples of Gix here, which would be fine. This is fine in any deck that has like 6+ Unearth cards, That way, every time you play the Disciples of Gix, you know that you're just filling your grave with at least 3 Unearth abilities. Wouldn't play this in any deck that has less than 5 or 6 Unearth cards, because if you ever play this and you get maybe 1 Unearth card in your graveyard out of it, it's just far too expensive for that deal. But if you can always get 3 Unearth cards into the grave, I think that's where I'm pretty happy with it. So take Refractor, hopefully get Trench Stalker. If not that, maybe get Emergency Weld. If not that, definitely get Disciples of Gix. All right, pack 3, pick 4 now. Machine Over Matter, actually, a very efficient combat trick. Well, not combat trick, really, more like just a bounce spell, a tempo play to slow your opponent down. But in a deck like this, you can really see how efficient this is. So 2 mana, return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand is already just a staple card that's been printed in like every draft format ever, and it's always like playable. It's like a 23rd playable if you need some more interaction. But 1 mana to bounce any non-land permanent is a really good deal, and that's what it's going to be a majority of the time in a deck like ours, where we have 3 1-mana artifact creatures, and we'll be playing at least 3 2-mana artifact creatures as well. That's if we cut Bulwark and Mindworker, and we don't have any of our late-game artifact creatures out, so I think Machine Over Matter actually just plays incredibly. There's a Thraxidemon, but I've got better cards than that. I could go for Tower Workers, just trying to hit Cityscape Leveler, but trying to ramp into 1 card when the rest of our deck is pretty aggressive, I don't think that is exactly where we want to be. So I think I'm going to go Machine Over Matter here. We could also, because I'm already potentially splashing red off of Energy Refractor and Elsewhere Flask, take a Junkyard Genius. That is the big competition for the Machine Over Matter, because if we splash red to the point where we're main decking a mountain or 2, trying to get a lot of work done off Energy Refractor and Elsewhere Flask, then we could play Horned Stoneseeker and Junkyard Genius, both of which are solid aggressive cards early in the game, and make Powerstone tokens to help get to Cityscape Leveler. So they really help both aspects of our deck. They help our early aggro, and they help our late game Cityscape Leveler be more reasonable. So could go for the Grixis build here, the blue-black-red, splash in the Junkyard Genius. And it might be a little greedy off just Elsewhere Flask Energy Refractor, but I've got a decent amount of artifact creatures as well, so whatever's going on in my mana, I can cast some spells. I'm actually going to go for it. Let's take a Junkyard Genius here. Get a 3 mana Power Stone producer. And for pack 3, pick 5, not a lot going on here. Moment of Defiance is pretty good in this archetype. Give something lifelink and make sure you've drawn your second card in the turn out of nowhere. Powerstone Fracture is also pretty good though, and we are still pretty low on removal. 2 Disfigure, 1 Powerstone Fracture, 1 Desynchronize. I think I'd like to just be on double Disfigure, double Powerstone Fracture here. That seems fine to me. Gigamole looks good in this deck too though. We've got a lot of Unearth cards, so play this, mill a few, maybe get an Unearth card into our grave and then pick up a different creature. Or just play it as a 4 mana 3/4 and put some Unearth into our grave. A lot of good stuff. But I'm pretty interested in having another Powerstone Fracture. Mightstone's animation, pretty sweet for this kind of deck. Obviously, the kind of intended thing is to throw it onto a Powerstone and turn your non-creature little token that doesn't do much into a 4/4 to beat down with. But you can throw this onto a Combat Courier, a Razor Lash Transmigrant, a Scrapwork Mutt, and turn your 2/1 or your 1/1 into a 4/4 as well. You draw a card while you play it, so pretty great. I'll take a Mightstone's animation here. Pack 3, pick 7. I will definitely take a Scrapwork Cohort. I am more than happy to play this in a deck that has an Energy Refractor and an Elsewhere Flask, because up front, 4 mana, 3/1, and a 1/1. Not terrible, especially when they're artifact creatures. Really easy to cast. Take another Mightstone's animation or a Machine Over Matter. Like both of those a whole lot. I think I'm actually going to go Machine Over Matter over the Mightstone's animation here. Like to have some more cheap instant speed interaction. Nothing going on here. I'll take a Self-Assembler. I guess then I could play this and our Mindworker, but I'm probably not going to. I'm just definitely not going to play Thraxidemon, Retrieval Agent here. When you compare these to the quality of our other 2-drops. I guess Retrieval Agent is just bad enough that even though I don't have a lot of 4-mana cards, I'm still not going to play it. But Thraxidemon is a good card. I just have, again, some really good 2-drops I'm not going to cut out of here. Take a Self-Assembler. I don't think it's going to make the cut, but I think it's the most likely. Well, could take a Levitating Statue now. We got the combo, Levitating Statue plus Mightstone's animation, but only having one copy of each means these are going to be pretty inconsistent. We're not always going to have the two together, and a Levitating Statue by itself isn't incredible unless you have a really high non-creature count, which I don't think we're going to, because a lot of the non-creatures we currently have in our deck are cards I'm going to want to cut. Like, I'm probably going to want to cut both these Urza's rebuffs, this Desynchronize, this Mask of the Jade Crafter. So I don't think we're going to have a super high non-creature count, but I'm definitely not going to play Third Path Savant, so might as well take it. Alright, we got back the Trench Stalker, we got back the Emergency Weld, we got back the Disciples of Gix, but as I said before, Trench Stalker is going to be the big hotness for this deck. 5 mana, 4/5 Death Touch Lifelink consistently. I don't think this is a deck that needs Emergency Weld, because the only creature that could end up in our grave that's super valuable is our Cityscape Leveler, which can unearth one time anyway. And just unearthing a Cityscape Leveler once is usually enough to end the game regardless, so take a Trench Stalker over Emergency Weld. Could splash in a Skyfisher Spider. Don't know if I want to do that, but it's more likely than playing a Coastal Bulwark or a Tower Worker. Probably don't. I'm already doing a lot just getting red mana into here. Splashing in off-color unearth effects is way easier than splashing in an off-color just mana cost, because no matter what happens with our mana base, we can always cast Scrapwork Cohort turn 4, and our worst case scenario is that we just don't unearth it. Worst case scenario, if we main deck something like Skyfisher Spider, is that it is stuck in our hand and it's like we mulliganed. It's like we're just down a card all game if we don't find that green source. So I'm a lot less likely to splash in that Skyfisher Spider than, you know, run off-color unearths and stuff. Alright. Pretty sure we want to be blue-black splashing red, but there's a possibility we narrow it down to just blue and black. I mean, no matter what, we're splashing red for the Scrapwork Mutts Unearth, but we can do that without running any mountains. If we want to play Junkyard Genius and Stoneseeker, we want to play a few mountains. 1 or 2. So I'm going to set the red cards right here, because they're some of the strongest cards in this deck. I don't want to instantly cut them, but I do want to set them aside to see what the deck would look like without them. So we want to cut down to 42 cards, I think. That way, that's just the 40-card blue-black deck. And then we know that we just get to cut 2 cards to put these in if we want to play the 3-color build. So let's cut 2 Urza's Rebuff. Cut Desynchronize. It's a solid piece of interaction. It's just a lot of mana. Mask of the Jade Crafter. Just a very expensive dork. I mean, we've got the Energy Refractor plus Elsewhere Flask to unearth this one time, but I still don't think that's going to be great. Mine Worker definitely bad. Bulwark, just weaker than the other 2 drops. It's not terrible. Cave Guard's a ton of mana. Avenger's a ton of mana. We've already got 1 Boulder Branch, 1 Leveler at the top end. I think we'll keep those in. Still got to cut a lot of cards. 5 more cards. I want to just cut down some of the slower cards and just be that all-in 2 mana 3/3 of Angel of Synthesis aggro build. So it'd be cut these 2. I'm gonna have them in their own pile still though. Alright, 1, 2, 3, 2 more cuts. Probably a Boulder Branch. I think even if I'm really aggressive, I want to keep Cityscape Leveler in there. That might be particularly greedy, but so big. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 more cut to go. Definitely not a land with an 8-drop in the deck. What's the creature versus non-creature count here if I cut those 3? 17 creatures, but that counts these 2 creatures, so we want to cut another non-creature, I think. You know, honestly, cut 1 Powerstone Fracture doesn't seem terrible. Got some Unearth cards that I can definitely sack to the Powerstone Fractures, but I don't really have many Powerstones anymore if I am not playing the red, if I'm going to be just a blue-black core. I guess if I'm just going to be blue-black, I can just cut Elsewhere Flask and just run Energy Refractor. That seems pretty fine. Yeah, that seems super reasonable. I think I'm going to go for it. I think I want to streamline down to just blue-black, because then we can really just hit our opponent with consistency with 3 Evangels and Thopter Mechanic. That's 4 incredibly strong 2-drop aggro dorks that are just going to keep slamming in throughout the game. We've got tons of incidental card draw to keep triggering them and keep fueled with more cheap stuff, and it's tons of cheap creatures. We can make sure that we can grind out long games just by having so many cards that draw a card when they hit the board, and a bunch of Unearth abilities potentially. So we've got good late game value just inherently with all the activated abilities and stuff to where we can just load up on 1s and 2s. And then obviously we still have our 1 mega late game bomb with Cityscape Leveler. Yeah, I think I like running the deck like this. I think we will call it a deck here. Alright, here's a look at our final deck list for today. This is going to be showing off the blue-black draw 2 archetype for the format. We have 3 copies of the Signpost Uncommon, Evangel of Synthesis. This is 2 mana for a 2/3 when it enters the battlefield, draw a card, discard a card. As long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, it gets +1/+0 and has Menace. So this archetype is going to be playing a lot of cards that will draw you a card when they enter the battlefield, or by sacrificing them. A lot of ways to draw 1 additional card. That way, if you're playing any of those cards during your turn, you've drawn 1 card during your draw step and 1 card from their effect. So we have Mightstone's Animation, Energy Refractor, 2 Scrapwork Mutt, and 3 Combat Courier for 7 cards that will draw 1 card, either by getting sacrificed or just when they enter the battlefield, as well as 3 Evangel of Synthesis, which also trigger each other thanks to that enter the battlefield, draw a card, discard a card. So we have 10 total cards that work with our draw 2 effects to really consistently activate our Evangel of Synthesis and let them attack in as 2 mana 3/3 menace cards, and really consistently load up counters onto our Thopter mechanic. So we're a pretty aggressive deck here with a lot of 1 and 2 mana creatures, mainly using the Evangels and the Thopter mechanic as our biggest threats, as well as Razorlash Transmigrant is a pretty solid threat. Outside of that, we are going to try to keep up with the grindier late game decks by just having so many cards in our deck that draw a card, or draw a card then discard a card, or discard a card then draw a card, to make sure that we stay fueled throughout the game. We have a little bit higher up on the curve, we have the Cohort giving us a wide board state, the Trench Stalker as a very consistent 4/5 Death Touch lifelinker, and then the Cityscape Leveler as a massive late game bomb. And for our non-creature spells, we have a good amount of interaction with 2 Disfigure, 2 Powerstone Fracture, 1 Machine Over Matter for a bounce spell, and then 1 Gix's Caress to pull something out of our opponent's hand and get a Powerstone towards a Cityscape Leveler, or to sacrifice to a Powerstone Fracture. So again, really sweet stuff on the creature curve, really sweet stuff outside of the creature curve. We've got a super low curve, but I'm still running 17 lands to help get to Cityscape Leveler. And one of the things that's going to make sure that our deck can still compete with later game plays is the fact that we are still going to stay ahead, or at least at parity in terms of card advantage, because we have just so many ways to draw cards and draw and discard, get out of any mana flood or mana screw, anything like that. So the deck should be super consistent and super fun, but without further ado, let's see how it plays out as we head into the gameplay. Alright, here we are on the play for game 1, and we've got a definite keep. Combat Courier into a Scrapwork Mutt. We have a Machine Over Matter to slow our opponent down, and a Mightstone's Animation to make our Combat Courier a 4/4. Really beat down with that thing. Our opponent's going to start off with a turn 1 Goblin Blast Runner here, which does stop our Combat Courier from getting in. Drop a Scrapwork Mutt, discard a Swamp, draw a card. Find another swamp, pass the turn. Our opponent is on red-black Sacrifice, one of the most aggressive archetypes in the format, but we've got a nice cheap curve to try to keep up. I say that, and then I've drawn my 8 mana card, so now we're going to try to make it to 8 mana. Let's send in the Scrapwork Mutt. We're pretty cool with trading that off. And they are just going to trade it off into the Blast Runner, fair enough. Pass the turn from there. Our opponent's going to cast a Carrion Locust to exile the Mutt from our graveyard. That makes our trade a little worse, a little sadder about that, but we don't have the red source yet anyway. We just have the 1 Energy Refractor in the deck. So now that they're tapped out, at least we get to Mightstone's animation without fear of any instant speed interaction to counter it. So we get to guaranteed draw the card off of it, hit them for 4. And we're at 5 out of 8 lands for Cityscape Leveler now. Pretty much everything in our deck is a good draw, which is nice. Any non-land cards, we can just run them out. Keep committing to the board state, and any lands that we draw get us closer to our big end game bomb. You love to see it. Alright, Powerstone Fracture. They have to sacrifice their Locust to do that, though, so they are legitimately down a card there. They have to sack a creature and spend their removal spell to get the Combat Courier killed. Cash in the Combat Courier here. Yeah, we want to keep hitting land drops. Let's cash in the Combat Courier to draw a card. See what we hit. Plus, they might have another Carrion Locust style card to try to exile more of our Unearth from our grave. There we go, another land. We do want that land, so I'm going to play the Transmigrant here rather than playing the Scrapwork Mutt. Because I would like to be able to discard a card, draw a card on this, and get some value out of it, but I don't really want to discard anything currently in my hand. If I draw into a Thopter Mechanic, that's going to make that very tempting to draw a second card this turn. But I want to Machine Over Matter the Butcher. I want to play a Thopter Mechanic, which means my only choices for the Mutt would be a land or the Cityscape Leveler itself. You know what? I'm going to get a little greedy here. I'm going to discard the land. Find an Energy Refractor. That's a beautiful draw. Bounce the Butcher. Attack for 3. And we've got a nice wide board state to beat them down a lot next turn. And they just replay the Battlefield Butcher. There's an Evangel of Synthesis, draw a card, discard a card. Could rather do that, get more creatures out, than play the Refractor in case I want to discard the Refractor instead of whatever I draw. Land 6. I'm never going to play the Cityscape Leveler. I think I'm just going to accept that and just stay aggressive with what I currently have on board, because Refractor to trigger the +1/+0 Menace next turn is so big. It is so big. So here they kill my 3/1 and I hit for 6, have their life total. Or I just hit for 4, put them to 8. And don't lose a creature. I think either way is pretty dang good. Let's just hit for 4, I guess. For now, they're down to 8. Ooh, they're 3-color. They got an island now. You know, I should probably have just discarded this Cityscape Leveler by now. If I'm just accepting that I'm going to keep discarding lands to not be able to cast it regardless. Alright, nice Planeswalker. It's a bit of an issue, but I think we're still doing pretty well here. I guess they block Transmigrant, block a 2-1. I mean, we trigger the Menace here, and then they can't block everybody. Oh my god, another Evangel? Oh, we are doing so well. Yeah, let's give them some free kills to poke in for a lot, because all they do is, what, scry 1 and draw a card next turn? Yeah, off the +1. So we put them down to 5, and then we play another menacing threat for next turn. Plus have the mana to unearth the Scrapwork Mutt. Discard? No, let's actually discard the Cityscape Leveler. And just if I get to 8 mana, we'll just get one Trample Haste attack in that blows up any one of their blocks. Yeah, I should have discarded this a long time ago. Alright, Overwhelming Remorse on our creature that would have died into being a 1/1 flyer.
Plus I can improve on ancient design.
And another Overwhelming Remorse on one of our synthesises. Synthesize? Either way, still going to be lethal here thanks to the Scrapwork Mutt trigger. I guess even if we didn't get the Scrapwork Mutt trigger, we would hit them for exactsies, but now we hit them for 1 extra damage with the +1/+0 from the Evangel. Alright, that played out really, really well. Really enjoyed how the deck played out. I think I love this deck build. I love just the boatload of cheap creatures that like draw a card or discard a card, draw a card, or draw and discard. That curves out so well, and I think I didn't play this game out perfectly, especially with the Cityscape Leveler there, and the deck still played pretty incredibly, but we can definitely learn some stuff for the future. I think in the future, Cityscape Leveler, I might just always discard this thing first, because we have such a consistent loadout of just cheap creatures to keep curving out with and applying pressure with, that it feels like the best turn 8 plays are always going to be like the Unearth with a haste attack to just finish them, rather than sitting here waiting to play it sorcery speed, no haste, and all that. I don't know, I guess it'll depend on the game, but I think most of the time I should pretty heavily consider just discarding the Cityscape Leveler to my discard and draw or draw and discard effects a little sooner. But we'll start it off 1-0 as we head into game 2. Here we are for game 2. The lack of a black source here is pretty bad. There's only one castable card, and that's Razorlash Transmigrant. If I hit a swamp, the hand is very powerful. If I don't, we are going to fall real far behind real quick. I'm going to take a mulligan here. Alright, much better mana. Pretty slow hand, though. I'm cool to get rid of a land here with Scrapwork Mutt and Refractor, both drawing a card towards another land. Another Powerstone Fracture. Might discard one of these Power Stones to draw a card. Argothian Sprite. Don't love that I cannot block that thing, because it can't be blocked by artifact creatures. It's got a big mana sink as well to get a bunch of counters on it, but that'll be for much later. Arbalest Engineers, that's pretty good against a 1 toughness card. Deal 1 to any target when it hits the board. Scrapwork Mutt players in shambles. Oh, they're just going to give trample. Right, yeah, I mean, I guess the Mutt doesn't matter if they have a 3/3. That is tremendously aggressive. We're down to 15, turn 3. Yeah, we got some issues here. Caress, and then next turn I can Refractor, Powerstone Fracture. Got a Rust Goliath, Excavation Explosion, Dwarven Forge Chanter. I'm not super scared about the Chanter or the Goliath even with a Powerstone Fracture in hand, so I'm gonna get rid of the Explosion. Mutt is not going to block well at all, so we just attack with that. Alright, there's the Dwarven Forge Chanter. I think we got a bit of a shot here. If we make it to 5 mana, Trench Stalker can really get us back into this game. So I can definitely Gnawing Vermin. That'll trade into the Argothian Sprite. We can mill ourselves too here. Alright, no Unearth cards, but we got 2 non-land cards out of the way. Those both would have been good draws though, Disfigure or Mightstone's Animation. Get the Refractor down. We do hit the land for a Trench Stalker next turn. Then we have a 4/5 blocker. They are miles away from 10 mana to play that as a 10/10. So I don't think I need to hold on to Powerstone Fracture here if I want to just help myself survive a bit longer. I would fracture away the Engineers. That would be the plan. Vermin blocks kills Sprite and I just take 1. Seems fine. Because if I don't do that, then I block there. And I don't get any good blocks off Mutt, so I take 4. Yeah, let's buy some time. Kill the Engineers, I think. Again, still a very long time till they have 7 mana for Argothian Sprite. 3 turns minimum. Alright, they probably have a combat trick of some kind. Let's see. Nope. We get to kill the Argothian Sprite, take 1 damage down to 9. They play a 3/5 Rust Goliath. Yep. That is a-okay with us when we have a 4/5 Trench Stalker. And if they attack, we will 100% chump block with the Scrapwork Mutt now so that we can get the Death Touch Lifelink Trench Stalker going. Thanks to our Energy Refractor to hit that red source for the Unearth. Another Rust Goliath. Well, Combat Courier also gets the Trench Stalker going, but I kind of want it as a blocker. I guess it depends on what we hit from Combat Courier. If we hit a non-land, then we can probably attack with Trench Stalker here. Well, not so sure now. If I attack with Trench Stalker, they probably don't block, and I go to 13, they go to 14, but then I'm at 13 life with a 2/1 on board. 13 minus 7, I basically just take all that. I go down to 6. If I don't attack, I go down to 5. I take 1 more damage, but I get to double block and kill a Rust Goliath, so I think I don't attack. Saving this in the graveyard so I can get another lifelink next turn. That way if I draw something good next turn, I can get the Trench Stalker attack and play a creature. Or a removal spell or whatever. I already I used both Powerstone Fractures though, because I discarded 1, yeah. Obstinate Baloth is pretty nice. Tremendously happy to have a Trench Stalker on this board state. That thing is keeping us alive more than anything else. Another land. Well, I guess I have my 8 mana for Cityscape Leveler. Not nothing. But I can't attack, and they're getting really close to just killing me. Attack, gain 4. They attack with everybody. I disfigure Baloth, trade Mutt into it, take 7. After gaining 4, go down to 6. Is that better than just holding up Disfigure? I hold up Disfigure, I kill a Baloth naturally with a Trench Stalker. I guess probably my best blocks are actually to Trench Stalker on a Dwarven Forge Chanter and then Disfigure Baloth Mutt. Take 6, go to 3. Because disfiguring a Rust Goliath would make it a 1-3, which Mutt still wouldn't kill. I think it's Trench Stalker attack here, and then disfigure Scrapwork Mutt and Obstinate Baloth. Take the 7. Really bad at math. I actually go to 5, not 6. Oh, wait, no, I do go to 6. No way. Well, that's a horribly good draw for our opponent. A horribly bad thing for us. Surprised they didn't just blow up the Mutt, but I guess this does the same thing. Yeah, that's super bad. I can't kill anything with the Scrapwork Mutt. Alright, I think this game's over. We'll just take our 12. Draw a card, discard a card. Another land. They have 5 attackers when we're at 1. If I attack with Trench Stalker, we go up to 5. We have 2 blockers. We can block Obstinate Baloth. The trample from Rust Goliath means we're still dead, though. No, I have to put Evangel on a Rust Goliath to stop all 3 of that damage. Put a Scrapwork Mutt on the Obstinate Baloth. Disfigure and Engineers, and we go to 1. I die if I don't attack with Trench Stalker. I go to 1 if I do. So we attack in, go to 1. Another land, but we've got the Energy Refractor to discard a card, draw a card with Scrapwork Mutt. Evangel of Synthesis is another blocker. So I'll have 1 blocker up, which is not enough. Another land. Alright, now we're dead. Because I can be at 5 life with 1 blocker. Chump block the Baloth, go to -2. Or I can be at 1 life with 2 blockers and then go to like -3. Dang. Actually kind of close. Got them down to 8. Better than I thought we'd do. One and one, heading into game number 3. Here we are now for game 3. How does this work? Exile a non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Okay, so it doesn't do anything yet. We'll just play a combat courier. I don't think I need to disfigure that. Argothian Sprite. We might disfigure an Argothian Sprite. I'd rather disfigure that than play a Scrapwork Mutt right now? I don't think so. Opponent with the full-on curve out. 1 mana 1/1, 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/3. Classic vanilla test creatures as well. Grizzly bears into Centaur Courser. All we have is interaction now. Just pretty awkward. They just drop down a swamp and pass. Cast these instants. Let's see if I can get a disfigure on the sprite. Yep. Alright. I think I'm going to draw a card here. I'm going to cash it in. Rock Hunter. Can disfigure that now. I could also just trade a Scrapwork Mutt into it, which would be fine. I'll hold up the Disfigure mana just in case, but I think I'm just going to block the Rock Hunter with a Scrapwork Mutt. A Dragon Engine. 1/3 flyer. Buff itself up with that +1/+0 stuff. Eight mana for the back half. They're at 4. I can probably bounce that if I need to. Alright, Gnawing Vermin is the draw. We find an Energy Refractor. I guess they could Haywire Might to exile the Energy Refractor, but maybe get a Mutt down and then Powerstone Fracture, sacking an Unearthed Mutt. Let's look for some Unearth. Alright. Need an Energy Refractor for that, but that's better than nothing. I guess I could Powerstone Fracture, kill the Perimeter Patrol and the Haywire Might off of the Gnawing Vermin, and just start taking like 1 a turn in the sky. Till I need to maybe Machine Overmatter that thing. Could also disfigure. Disfigure would also have gnawing vermin kill both of those, so I should disfigure instead so that I still have Powerstone Fracture to kill the flyer later. Obstinate Baloth, alright. I don't think I want to bounce the Dragon Engine anymore because they're going to have the mana for it sometime, guaranteed with that Hall of Tags in to create Power Stones. So let's actually bounce the Obstinate Baloth because we're at 12 here. Make them recast that next turn. Seven lands left out of these 22. We've got all three of our draw card, discard a cards to help discard these to draw into non-lands. Get out of some flood here. So we have 3 draw a card, discard. We have 1 more mutt. So 3 draw a card, discard a card, 1 discard a card, draw a card left in our deck. Oh, we gotta find them. I think I have to just fracture the Baloth. At 11 life, I'm gonna start taking 4 a turn. Arbalest Engineers is such a nasty card. It's 3 copies in 2 games. That is a sweet, sweet card. Land 11 it is, and we look very dead. If I don't block Dragon Engine, I'm dead on board. Well, Pyrrhic Blast for game. Bummer, we have just not found enough gas these last 2 games. Both of our opponents as well have kind of ended their curve at 5 mana. 5 lands and all gas. Yeah, I mean, we drew 4 more cards than our opponent, so it's understandable to hit a few more lands, but they saw 5 lands all game. We drew 4 more cards and saw 6 more lands because we saw 11 that we discarded through. Yeah, that's not just like we drew more cards so we saw more lands. We also just saw a much higher percentage of lands than our opponent out of the percentage of cards drawn. Bummer. Rough draws these past couple games. We are 1-2 as we head into game 4. Here we are for game 4, crossing our fingers and praying for an island and hitting it immediately. Beautiful. Keeping it because we can play the Courier and the Disfigure and the Transmigrant off of just the swamps, plus discard, well, sacrifice the Courier to draw the card to dig towards the island, so 3 playable cards, one of which draws us a card to help find the other mana source. I think it was a super reasonable keep. And we did get paid off. We got really lucky with it. I'm going to go for Thopter Mechanic over Transmigrant first to try to get as many counters onto this as possible over time. There's a Junkyard Genius for our opponent. I would love to disfigure that. I guess I hit them for just as much damage if I sack the courier to put a counter on Mechanic or if I just attack. So let's just attack and play Transmigrant, I think. And then I could Might Stone's animation onto the Combat Courier next turn. That would put a counter on Mechanic and make the Courier a 4/4. Another Junkyard Genius. Alright, so they've got a... Wow, they have a busted deck, but we've got a busted mana curve and can hopefully beat them down too quickly for them to come back. But that's a massive amount of damage. Yes, they're going to trade into Thopter Mechanic and go down to 9. But yeah, 2 of the best signposts in common in the format, the Junkyard Genius and Transmigrant Crown for a great rare. There's a Killzone Acrobat, which is a good aggressive card, not super good defensively. We have 8 damage on board, so I can't kill them by bouncing the Acrobat, but I can still put them to 1, so I think we kind of just get there this game, but we'll find out. Looks pretty nuts. Yeah, they're just going to scoop them up, and that was a real quick, real aggressive rollout for us. And we're going to go back up to 2-2, back up to 50-50 as we head into game number 5. Here we are for game 5. Pretty awkward mana again. We can play Caress and Cohort and Trench Stalker, but that's only at 3 mana plus. It's going to be a bit slow. If we hit the blue source, it's going to be great. If we don't, we still have 3 castable spells, but it's slow. I don't love this hand, but I will keep it. We do find an Energy Refractor to get our blue source, as well as our Unearth effect for Scrapwork Cohort. And our opponent starts with a 2 mana, 2/2 Vigilance that gets a counter every single turn. So next turn it attacks as a 3/3, which means Gnawing Vermin isn't big enough to kill it. Then it attacks as a 4/4, then it attacks as a 5/5. We need to draw into Powerstone Fracture ASAP. Alright, so take 3. Another Evangel. By Caress, the Powerstone actually looks pretty good at this point in the game for that extra mana for Cohort and Mutt and stuff. But I would enjoy drawing a card and discarding a card right now, digging for outs to the Assembler. But let's see what's in their hand here. I'll take a 4 damage swing. They've got a Scrapwork Cohort. Wow. 3 different pretty great 4 mana cards to play, so no matter what I take, they'll still be able to do something. I think the Architect's probably the weakest. If I take the Cohort, they just have that Unearth ability for later. I gotta take Tactician or Cohort. Tactician doesn't buff the Assembler. I'm gonna get rid of the Cohort. Because then they can't just, like, slam down multiple creatures this turn. And that's the only soldier producer they have to go with the Tactician. I guess that gives them a 3 mana play. But it's just shoot me for 3 and get 1/1/1. Only the 1/1 is permanent here. Get rid of the 3/1 body. But yeah, this way the Tactician is kind of just a 3/4. Well, we miss a land drop here, which is quite bad. We can Scrapwork Mutt for only 2 mana and use a Powerstone on it, which gives us an opportunity to hit an island and play an Evangel here. Discard our own Cohort. No, probably have to discard Trench Stalker. Another Swamp. Well, I can play the Evangel. Still looking for Powerstone Fractures. Come on! There we go. There's a Powerstone Fracture for the Assembler. Like the idea of getting 2 blockers off a cohort. We have a courier, I think. This card is nuts, though. It's gonna be a 5/5 this turn. Okay, never mind. It'll be a 4/4 Flying Vigilance thanks to Thopter Architect. Down to 6. I think I need to leave as many blockers on this board as possible, as good as the token is with Energy Refractor. Actually see what we hit off a Gnawing Vermin. Swamp Disfigure. Where are the islands? There's no islands in our top 17 cards. If I sack the Vermin to Powerstone Fracture, we can kill their 1/1 Soldier and Autonomous Assembler. Seems solid, and then I can still play Combat Courier here. Then I still have the Power Stone for mana on future turns. I don't think I want to kill their Combat Courier. Alright. We're just hoping they don't draw artifacts, but that's immediately Energy Refractor. There's the Ocean Tactician, buffing nothing. Take 2, we're down to 4. Another Evangel. Gotta find some ways to deal with this Architect now. Cityscape Leveler, maybe eventually. We'll reanimate that. If I attack with my Evangel, it just runs into a Tactician anyway. So we pass turn. Cool. 4 of their creatures get flying this turn. That's a pretty good top deck. Well, this was a big old bummer of a draft. I liked our deck a lot, but we had a lot of mulligans, a lot of mana issues, and a lot of mana flood. Some monocolored hands, leading to a lot of the early mulligans. And just a lot of games with a lot of lands drawn. Definitely things we could have done better in the gameplay. I probably could have found a better Gix's Caress choice that game. For sure. If I just got rid of the thing that made their stuff flying instead, they wouldn't have had an easy 3-drop plus, get a +1/+1 counterplay that early. But we still would have been taking a bunch of damage under a lot of pressure. I don't think we'd be winning that game, but it's possible. I definitely made some misplays here throughout the course of the games, but especially that third game. I think that was probably the most winnable of our losses. Mainly because the Gix's Caress choice there did not pan out well for us at all. Was not super ideal. Overall, I mean, when the deck won, it absolutely won. Completely demolished, and it really showed off what I was kind of thinking when building this deck. The general idea of being able to curve out with these cheap cards super consistently and discard every extra land and just keep just all gas, no breaks, disfigures, Powerstone Fractures, bounce, get their stuff out of the way and keep beating down. cheap menace cards and all that, but it really did not play out like that in our losses. We, again, just didn't hit a lot of our draw and discard, or our discard and draw in a couple of those flooding games, and the mana base played out super, super awkwardly, where we made it like halfway through our deck there and still didn't have an island and some stuff like that. So I don't know, good amount of variance there. Certainly things I could have done better. I'm not too unhappy with this deck build or the draft though. Like, I think this looks like a pretty solid deck on paper. I think this is absolutely a deck that probably goes somewhere between 4-3 and 6-3 on average. I think this is a pretty good deck, but combination of bad draws and bad plays are going to shove it down into the 2 and 3 bracket, unfortunately. Not a super fun way to end the Brothers' War, but at least the deck was cool, the deck was fun, and when it won, when we just demolished like an incredible looking red-black deck and some other stuff like that, it was certainly kind of sweet looking. So that is going to end the Brothers' War drafts this time around, because we have cube drafts coming back tomorrow. We're going to play a couple of Chromatic Cube, and then we have the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth early access drafts coming out on Thursday and onward. So stay tuned for that if you are interested in the brand new set. It is that time of year. But that's going to end today's video. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons very much for supporting this channel, as well as you for watching. If you're interested in seeing more videos like this, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to tell the YouTube algorithm to send you some more in your recommended feed. If you'd like to catch me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below, and if you'd like to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link in the description below. Other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.